Thank you, Pastor Nader. There was this man in St. Louis. He was a preacher, and he established preaching stations at 4 churches there in St. Louis. The names: Emmanuel, Holy Cross, Zion, and the final one was Trinity. It turned out he was one of the founders of this church right here, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in Anaheim, California, Prince of Peace, that now has congregations all over the country. Well, let me tell you my story, how it ties in with those 4 churches in St. Louis. You see, there was a man by the name of Gerhard Henry over in Germany, and his last name was not my last name, but it was Birnbaum. And he married a lady by the name of Maria in Germany, and her name was my last name, Marting. And he decided to change his name to Marting. And he had a son that left Germany and came over to America in St. Louis. And this son in middle 1800s by the name of Gerhard Henry, the son of the man that used to be Birnbaum, he went to Emmanuel Lutheran Church in St. Louis. And he had a son by the name of Louis, that was my grandfather, and he was also baptized just like Gerhard at Emmanuel in St. Louis. And then there was a name of Gerhard Henry Lewis, my father, and he had me and my mom, and they were at that second church, Zion in St. Louis. And then here I come and am baptized at Zion. So I've got a heritage of Emmanuel and Zion, of the 4 churches that this C.F.W. Walter I was telling you about came over and established this preaching congregation. So in 1936, this young man, in June of 1936, was baptized at Zion and has been a card-carrying LCMS member for all these 87 years. Well, this Lou Marting in St. Louis, who had this heritage of all these Germans and all these German churches, was raised on Greer Avenue in St. Louis, and when he was just a tot, he would hear this radio program next door. Mr. Fred Meyer would sit in his hallway between these brick homes in St. Louis in the summertime, because maybe there'd be a cool breeze come through. In the summertime in St. Louis, that was rare, but he did that anyway. And he would turn his radio on, and he would listen to this program so that the whole neighborhood, including this little guy next door, Lou, could hear it. And he was listening to Walter A. Meyer, the first speaker of the Lutheran Hour. So this happened, the story that I'm telling you right now, happened about in the 40s sometime, 1940 sometime. And then I learned about Walter A. Meyer more. This man had a vision. He had a vision that technology was really important. Going 500 years before that, the Gutenberg press was the big thing of how Martin Luther got his message all spread out through Europe and beyond. And so this Walter A. Meyer had the idea that the radio was the way to go. And so he came to an organization called Lutheran Layman's League, which later became Lutheran Hour Ministries. And he says, could you help us with our radio station, which had 2 masts in downtown St. Louis, to get the radio and the Lutheran program broadcast throughout St. Louis. Well, that lasted so long on Jefferson Avenue, and then they moved the seminary where this building was to Clayton, Missouri, all part of St. Louis, where I was at, not quite yet in 27. So they had a new seminary in St. Louis called Concordia Seminary, but they couldn't figure out how to get the radio station moved from Jefferson to Clayton. And they Walter A. Meyer went to Lutheran Laymen's League, which is now known as Lutheran Hour Ministries, and said, could you help us? So Lutheran Laymen's League helped build a radio tower, not the masts on top of buildings downtown, but a radio tower, and built a building, just a little bit larger than this room that we're in here, and that became radio station KFUO. And so they could broadcast in St. Louis about 50 miles around, because the Lutheran Laymen's League helped establish this facility. But then Walter A. Meyer, that's the fellow I heard on the radio in the 40s, he said, I've got a vision which became the longest running radio station and the longest running Christian radio station in the world. And the radio program, the Lutheran Hour, became the longest running continuous Christian radio program that's on today, that I heard driving up in my Chevrolet Cruze, and I listened to it two ways. I listened to it on this app on my telephone, which I got right in my pocket here, but I had it through the speaker on the phone. And then I said, wait a minute, it's on XM radio at 7 to 7:30. So I listened that way. So this radio program that Walter A. Meyer was preaching on when I was there, a kid in St. Louis, listening to Fred Meyer, listening to his radio. It's still on today. It's the longest running. It's got 90 seasons now that it's been on. And you're shaking your head like you know all about that.
I know a little bit about it.
Okay. Well, I've got to tell you, there's the rest of the story. As it turned out, the radio program was broadcast around the world. They translated it, but then they said, wait a minute. You know, this isn't so good. We're translating something from the United States. They've got a culture, they've got a language, and they've got people there, but it's different in Peru. It's different in Lebanon. It's different in, you name a country, Sri Lanka. It's different. So they said, we've got to have offices, we've got to have stations in all these different places around the world, instead of translating something that's broadcast in America and translated so we can listen to it. And what has that become? It's become Lutheran Hour Ministries. And now, instead of reaching across the United States, instead of reaching in Canada, instead of reaching from Luxembourg to Great Britain, where they wouldn't, because the Anglican Church there, we didn't have a station there. Anyway, now it is using all these different technologies, television, radio, the internet, social media, you name it, all these different methods. And now, instead of reaching like 50 million people every week, which was the case in 2012, now this message of telling people about Jesus is reaching around the world in all these offices, over 60 countries, 30 ministry centers. It's reaching 195, not 1,000, but 195 million. Can you imagine that? That's half the United States. 195 million touches with the gospel, not every year, but every week. We give God and the Holy Spirit all the credit for moving the pioneers to think about using technology this way. We give God and the Holy Spirit all the credit for moving the hearts of people in 1930, in 2024, and everything beyond, everything in the middle and beyond, for helping to get Jesus to be known by people. We even use satellite television that reaches places like Pakistan. Could you imagine preaching the gospel in Pakistan, in Iran, Iraq, in Saudi Arabia? We use in Cyprus. We send a signal up, and Pastor Nader can tell you all about that. We send the signal up, it comes down by satellite, and there's no stopping it. There's no interference. Children can listen to it. We have children's programs telling them about Jesus. We have adult programs and everything in between, all because of what started back in St. Louis with those two masts downtown on Jefferson Street and that radio tower at the Concordia Seminary and everything that happened in the meantime.
Wow.
And so now, each of you can listen to the radio program. All you have to do is, if you got a computer, that's one way to listen to it 24/7. If you got a smartphone, you can listen to it 24/7. You can just go to this app, which is Connect, LHM Connect, like I was using on the way driving up here. You can listen to it 24/7, every day of the year. And people can stumble into it and listen to it on the radio or whatever. And people around the world will be hearing about Jesus every day of the year to the tune of 195 million as we speak, and who knows what it'll be next year or the following year. God be praised. We've got a program now where these 30 offices around the world that reach 60 countries now have an internship program. You know what an intern is? I had an internship when I was in school, in college, and they gave me a job, and I did the job in Pennsylvania. I was educated in St. Louis. I was an intern, so to speak, a summer intern. So now they're going to use interns with Lutheran Hour Ministries, where we have these offices, one in Asia, one in Africa, one in Latin America, and then they're going to set up internships, 4 internships on each of those key offices. So our intention is to grow the touches exponentially from what it is now. So God be praised when that happens. Even God be praised for them thinking about how to turn an internship program into a gospel reach around the world. Well, anyway, am I excited enough?
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask if you'd be so kind to take this yellow pad here, and Judy gave me her email address, and we agreed that at Walnut Village, I would be sending her information about Lutheran Hour Ministries and how you could keep up to date on that. And if you'd be so kind, if you just write your name and your email address, and I will be happy to keep you posted. And so we'll just write it down the center there. And also I think that Sue would likely tell you what she would do also.
All right,
So thank you very much.
Lou has a table here. Please feel free to talk to him if you have questions, want more information about anything he said. And I think he has some of LHM material also to give, right? Yeah.
We even reach the kids. And I saw Heather, your teacher here at Prince of Peace Lutheran School, and she loved these books. There's one on prayer, one about the Bible tells me so, one about the bully, one about sharing your faith. And they're written in rhymes. The kids love them. We go to teachers' conventions, and they're starting to know more about them, and they just love them. I have them in my church in my, we call it the Narthex, and every week we keep them supplied. So thank you.
There you